Welcome to Average Joe's Gym's Home Projects, where we do projects and maintenance at home that even an average Joe can accomplish. In today's episode, we're going to build this small couch end table for our living room, all while using tools and materials you can pick up at your local hardware store, online, or even at a yard sale. Let's do it. So I had this lumber left over from my son's desktop project from a previous episode. One of the pieces was loose, so I decided to add a couple more pocket holes and screws to make the end table nice and sturdy. Here's a quick tip for all you amateur woodworkers out there. Make sure you know where you put your stuff down. I couldn't find that drill bit right there because I put it right behind my drill. Found it. Now let's get to work. Kreg jigs are a pretty great little tool. I highly suggest you pick one up if you're going to be building any kind of furniture. Here's another tip. Check your wood glue before starting your project. If you forgot to close the top after your last one, you end up with this. Just so you know, squeezing harder on a glue bottle with hardened glue inside doesn't make it return to liquid form. I eventually got some fresh glue in there and was able to put it together. Now it's time to put the screws in and make it really nice and secure. Once that was done, I went to work on the frame and the legs. These are some leftover remnants I had, but you can rip a 2x4 down the middle with your table saw and get similar dimensional lumber. I like to kind of set things in place to get an idea of how things are going to look when I put them together. You'll see throughout this video, I'll periodically set pieces in place to get a picture in my head of what I'm making. When you're cutting your legs, make sure to include the thickness of your tabletop. That'll include an extra 1.5 inches or so of height on your table. Alright, there it is. Now it's time to measure and make the shelf that I'm going to put underneath the main tabletop. Oh yeah, don't forget, it takes electricity to run your power tools, so don't forget to plug it in. Okay, so I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm going to set up the framing and the legs onto the shelf, just like I did with the tabletop. That's because I need to know where I need to cut the corners out for the legs to fit. I hate when that happens. Luckily, that leg that fell off the table there didn't have any major damage that would cause me to have to sand it off or even replace the thing. By the way, electric jigsaws also need to be plugged in order to work as well. Alright, now it's time to do the sanding. Just put in some headphones, start an audiobook, or put on your favorite playlist. Start with a coarse grit sandpaper to take out any imperfections in the wood. Then go back over everything again with a fine grit. You can go as fine as you want. I stopped at 220. If you have any holes or cracks or seams you want to fill, just pick up some of this pliable wood filler. It works pretty great, and it changes color after it dries. So this project took a ton of pocket holes and screws. If you're thinking of building any kind of furniture, I suggest picking up a Craig jig. They're about $100, but well worth every cent. I include links in the description for any of the tools I use. I had to think this part through a little bit. In order to attach the shelf to the legs, I needed to get pocket holes onto the shelf. I used the jig and just hung the rest of the shelf off the side of my work table. It actually worked pretty great.
Well, you need to stop that too, Jay. Or Kai.
I actually wasn't going to show you this part, but I figured why not. I'm going to put some countersink holes here using just the tip of the Craig jig bit so that when I put the screws in, they'll be below the surface of the wood. Now it's time to stain the wood. I'm always too scared to do it because at this point I've already sunk hours into this table. My beautiful and talented wife is very good at it, so I always recruit her for this part. She fit this stain job in between work and tennis practice. She's such a professional, she didn't get one drop of stain onto her tennis skirt and didn't even worry about it one bit. My daughter even got in on it, taking after mom, helping out with dad's projects. Here's the stain for those of you who are curious about what color this is. After the stain's dried, it's time for the polyurethane. I like to use quick drying satin finish poly. I suggest a decent quality paintbrush be used for this type of project because it'll be something people that visit you will see, and you'll just get a smoother finish in the end. If I haven't bored you to death yet with me painting polyurethane, just think of this. You pretty much have to apply it to 3 sides, let it dry, then apply it to the bottom. Depending on how many coats you do, we're talking days. Always a practice in patience, as I tend to get really excited to put whatever it is I'm making together after I finish cutting the wood. Okay, so right before your final polyurethane coat, I suggest you throw a little bit of sandpaper on there. I use 220 and a sanding block to take off all the bubbles in the polyurethane before I put the final coat on to make it nice and smooth. I remembered to do this right before bedtime, so I was in luck to be wearing my Star Wars Christmas pajama pants. Always a classic. Just wipe all the poly dust off with an old rag and start your final coat. It should be dry by morning, and then you can flip it and do the same thing on the back side. Now that everything's dry, it's time to get excited and finally get to put everything together. Not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I did such a good job with the finish work, I had to clamp the pieces together just so that the wood would hold still long enough for me to put the screws in. It was like trying to screw a piece of ice onto another piece of ice and just trying to hold it with your hand.
Well, I thought something was because I was eating a goldfish.
Another little word of advice here. If you put the whole frame on before you sink any of the legs, there's not really any room for your drill. So I did half the frame, attached 2 legs, then I finished the other half. It still was really tight and was difficult, but I finally got it all in there, and I think it turned out pretty good. Most of the woodworking projects I do are essentially to just try and impress my wife. I brought her out here to take a look at it and pick the height of the shelf so that the finished product would meet her expectations. You don't see it here, but she was super stoked to see the finished project. Mission accomplished. Once the measurement was picked, I marked each leg where the top of the shelf was going to sit. Now we're on the home stretch. 4 final screws to put that last shelf in, and we'll be all set. So here it is, a beautiful completed end table for our couch in our living room. If you enjoyed this project, please check out our other projects on Average Joe's Gym's Home Projects. And please like and subscribe for future projects.